So our next story involves one of my favorite filmmakers, that being Kevin Smith. Obviously, Kevin Smith made the Clerks films and the Jay and Silent Bob movies and is responsible for inspiring so many young independent filmmakers coming out of the 90s and 2000s. He really kind of revolutionized independent cinema with Clerks, proving that a movie can really be made by anyone, no matter how working class you are. And he's had an interesting career since then, one that's been increasingly defined by his association with smoking weed. That's one of the big reasons why the Jay and Silent Bob movies have been so popular. And Kevin Smith is obviously an icon in stoner culture. For those reasons, it shocked a lot of us. I know it shocked me and yourself, Alex, to hear that Kevin Smith has actually decided to quit smoking weed. Apparently, the indie legend, whose characters have been stoned more or less nonstop since 1993, has decided to quit using marijuana. And this is according to comicbook.com. He told the audience on his Fat Man Beyond podcast during the most recent episode. Smith said that he planned to continue selling Caviar Gold, the branded marijuana he fronts with Jason Mewes, but that he would not be smoking pot himself for the foreseeable future, noting that he felt like he wasn't present enough in his daily life after 15 years under the influence. Kevin Smith famously started smoking pot after sharing some marijuana with Seth Rogen on the last day of filming for Zack and Miri Make a Porno, then took it on in earnest shortly after the movie failed at the box office. He said he would he said he worried about the long-term impact THC could have on his brain. I can say this. This is the first Fat Man Beyond that I've done not stoned, Smith told his audience. So I am present. I quit smoking weed. It was 5 weeks yesterday, so I'm crisp and very here, kids. Very alert. Is this what the show's like? What the F? And then they link to the episode. Because I did it for 15 years and now I just want to be present. When I started smoking weed, kids, I had a very big wound in my heart, and weed was a really nice bandage that I put on top of it. And the wound kept getting bigger. And then I put on more bandages. And then one day I realized I was bandaged as a mummy and I couldn't see clearly and I couldn't hear clearly. And I wasn't really present anymore. In the episode, Kevin Smith also talked about his involvement with the upcoming Green Hornet animated series for Wild Brain, which is interesting. But yeah, this is a big shock. Like I said, Kevin Smith is a total icon in the stoner community. I would say he's at this point just as much of an icon as someone like Tommy Chong, right? Kevin Smith is synonymous with weed culture. Jay and Silent Bob are two of the most iconic stoner movie characters ever. And Kevin Smith has always made it a point of how proud he is to be a stoner. He talks about how he writes a lot of his films under the influence of cannabis. He talks about how he basically spends all day, every day, high as hell. So it's definitely a shock to hear that not only is he quitting smoking weed, but that he's kind of saying that it was making him it was making him feel not present, that he felt like he wasn't really alert, that he was just using it as a bandage, which is all interesting. What's your opinion on this, Alex?
Sell out. I'm just kidding. Uh, I'm just kidding. So, as a cannabis user myself, I know Gavin also is a cannabis user. I was very, very sad when this news happened because Kevin Smith is possibly one of the best like spokesperson people for cannabis. Like I don't think like him and Seth Rogen, I feel like really like had talked about like the benefits of cannabis and stuff like that. I think that I mean, there's also for one, he smokes weed. When he was smoking weed, he was smoking weed more than 98% of cannabis smokers. He was smoking like he was smoking from like 8 a.m. in the morning to like 8 at night. And he was just constantly high. So I get like you kind of like have, but I also just think it's a game of extremes because it's like, okay, you're smoking weed all day, every day, and then you just stop. Like I just wish like can't isn't there a middle ground? Like can't you just like smoke weed like in at the end of the day, like normal people do, or uh like again, like I don't like I've had days where I have smoked weed like all day every day, but I don't like that's not every day. And I feel like the reason why I just feel like if I just feel like there's just like some I will say that this is a true loss to stoner culture. If Seth Rogen says he stopped smoking weed, I don't know if I'm going to be really really sad, and I don't know, but at least we still have Seth Rogen. At least we still have Snoop Dogg. At least we still have Tommy Chong. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Alex. Um, it's definitely interesting, right? Because on one hand, if he really is overly dependent on the substance, that's something he needs to work on. And even though cannabis is relatively harmless when you compare it to other drugs like alcohol or obviously much harder substances, it seems relatively harmless, but you can get dependent on anything. I mean, Kevin Smith knows that he notoriously struggled with his weight and with overeating, which led him to having a heart attack, right? So at one point he was dependent on eating too much unhealthy food. He said he used to drink like a gallon of milk a day, which is absolutely insane to me. But the point is that it doesn't have to be heroin for you to get addicted to something. And it sounds like he was overly dependent on cannabis. It's easy for us to say, why can't you just be like a normal person and only smoke at the evening time? But if you're truly addicted to something or truly emotionally dependent on something, it doesn't matter how relatively harmless it may seem to be. You're dependent on that thing, and it might not be just so easy to not smoke weed until nighttime. He might feel like it really is better off just quitting cold turkey and being 100% sober. And like I said, if that's what the most healthy decision for him is, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, then that's probably an important step for him to take. And maybe at some point he'll learn to be a little bit more responsible and be able to smoke again on a more regular basis. But if he needs to take some time off, I think that's something that's important for him to do. I've found throughout my own career as a cannabis enthusiast that it is important to take breaks, right? It is important to take breaks. I've gotten in those routines where you are smoking pretty much constantly. And at a certain point, it does kind of numb you out, right? And you start to get to the point where you need it to sleep and you need it to eat, and it does become a real dependency. And again, it's not going to kill you. You can't overdose on it or anything like that. It's not truly dangerous like alcohol is. But there is a point where sometimes a break is very necessary. And also, it makes it more exciting when you get back into it, right? Because if it just becomes your daily routine, it's nothing really exciting or fun about it anymore. It just becomes your new reality. But if you take a bit of a break, step away, and then come back after a few months, I find that it's fun and exciting again. You kind of feel like a high schooler again, smoking weed, getting super high, getting the munchies, all that stuff that goes away once it just becomes a part of your daily routine. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Kevin Smith, coming to this decision or realization that he needs to take a break from cannabis. I've heard he's, doing the 12-step program and stuff like that. So I think he's taking this pretty seriously. I think he really does feel like it was an addiction for him. I know that reports say he's moved out of his home in LA with his wife and that he's now living in New Jersey. So I don't know if maybe there's some marital issues going on as well that have compounded his realization that he's been smoking too much. So maybe some familial stuff going on. I know he's had some drama with some of his coworkers at the Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash, stuff like that. So, I think that this has probably taken a toll on his personal life. And for those reasons, he's decided to maybe sober up, at least for the time being. And that's a, responsible choice to make, in my opinion. Although, sure, it does suck for stoner culture and all that stuff.
I think that you're right, Gavin, and I apologize if the whole like don't do it as a normal person thing kind of sounded a little like condescending, but like I'm again I am like again from like a very from a selfless nature. I am glad that he is getting the help he needs. I didn't know about the 12-step program, and I didn't know about the moving out, and now it like makes complete sense because like it's really like sad, and I'm glad that like he's been doing some stuff for himself. Like after his heart attack, he kind of changed the way he lived and stuff like that. Although, yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, it is a loss for stoner culture, but I mean, everybody's just got to do what they got to do, and yeah, um, the only thing I doubt he'll do this, but if he ever like becomes like an anti-pot like evangelist, like I will like fully criticize him for that.
Oh, same.
Like if he like starts like going on and like if he was like I was addicted to weed and like this horrible substance is killing the minds of young people all across the station, then I will all of my niceties will go out the window.
Mhm. That would really suck. I doubt that happens because he's still selling his brand of cannabis. He still has a weed product that you can buy if you live in, I think, California and maybe a few other legal states. So I that would just be an insane level of hypocrisy to continue profiting off of something while
Yeah.
simultaneously going out there, talking shit on it. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think he understands that there are plenty of people who can responsibly use cannabis, and that can continue to enjoy it without overindulging. But yeah, I mean, it is a real problem, right? I think it is a real problem with some people. Like I said, I've experienced it myself, where sometimes you just go a little bit overboard, and you have to take a step back and realize that, okay, I can't spend literally every hour of my life stoned. Like at some point, you do need that clarity of sobriety and the alertness that comes along
Yeah.
with it, and you can't just kind of live your whole life that way, at least in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure some people do and they enjoy
Mhm.
spending their entire day every day like that, but at a certain point it just gets kind of old and you have to take a break, and that's okay. So it'll be interesting to see what Kevin Smith does going forward. I wonder if this will affect his movie making at all. Obviously lots of people have noted the decline in quality of Kevin Smith's directorial output over the last 10 years or so. Now there's a couple films he's made in the last decade or so that I really enjoy. Like I think that Red State was fantastic, super underrated. I loved Tusk, for example, and another film that I think is quite underrated. It's a very divisive movie. But whenever it comes to Kevin Smith's attempts to recreate the kind of Jay and Silent Bob or View Askew universe properties, I think that they've been pretty unsuccessful. I was not a fan of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I was also not a fan of Clerks 3. It was one of my least favorite movies of last year, which is a bummer because I love the first two, especially the first one. So, who knows? Maybe he'll be able to get some more creative ideas going and really return to form as a director. Who knows? Maybe that this will give him a kind of change of mindset that'll help him get back into the saddle, so to speak.